hello there, folks. Dylan and the Details here, coming in hot with another reality check of the highest quality. We're getting down to the brass tacks today, folks. I tell you what, you're in for a true show because Resident Evil Village, oh my. Yes, indeed, it is that time again to get down to those brass tacks because the lazy millennial developers over at Clueless Capcom have obviously learned nothing. And yes, unfortunately, folks, the reality is this. This is no longer Resident Evil. Survival horror used to be the main element of Resident Evil. The story was overall a thriller narrative with twists, turns, and multiple scenarios. Instead, now we're given a thin plot with a faceless protagonist who has no meaningful ties to the series. Yes, indeed. This is no longer Resident Evil. That ship sailed long ago. You know what? I was expecting perhaps, since they made, a couple reimaginings, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, of course, I thought maybe they'd go in that direction more, but no. Now we're on the, silly train again, going to fucking who knows where. Witches, warlocks, and fucking werewolves and shit. Like, come on, bro. I like the occasional fairy tale, but come on. This is Resident Evil here. If you're gonna slap that title on there, and yes, it is the subtext, but it still says Resident Evil right on the front. That's fucked up. You're doing us dirty, Capcom. What are you doing here? I don't want this sideshow, this freak show, this fucking... Now I know this is old news, folks. Shinji Mikami's remake of Resident Evil is the ultimate there is when it comes to survival horror. But on the left there, you got something beautiful, something that kind of freaks me out, something that's scary. There's tension, there's something there. And then you got on the right there, Call of Duty with Grandpa in the kitchen firing a shotgun. I'm not really on that boat. I'm okay. Here's the thing. I'm not worried about first person. I like first person perspective in Resident Evil. I mean, I'm glad they're taking chances and shit. And it did work in Biohazard. Resident Evil 7 wasn't necessarily a bad game, but it wasn't necessarily a Resident Evil game. I mean, come on. Seriously, we gotta keep moving the wheels here, because Jesus Christ. There used to be multiple characters and scenarios back in the day on old-ass, outdated hardware, and the outdated hardware does more than any of the current generation consoles do as far as Resident Evil is concerned. I mean, come on the GameCube, bro. You could do more on the GameCube than you can on any of these consoles that are out right now. And I tell you what, that's incredibly sad. Thanks a lot, Capcom, for shortchanging us constantly since probably, I'm trying to think back. Probably since Resident Evil 6. You've been shortchanging us since then, and I am incredibly fucking upset about it. I love Resident Evil. I played all the games, even the not necessarily good Revelation games, and they're more Resident Evil than these current Resident Evil games are. I mean, come on. A chainsaw battle in the basement is not Resident Evil to me. Just being honest here, folks. Come on. What is Resident Evil to you? What is your vision of what this should be? Because, I mean, ultimately, it comes down to the fans. And in life, I think perspective is everything. And when it comes to the perspective of the fans, I don't think this is quite what we wanted. No, I'm saying we because, some of us are on board, and I consider myself a true fan. I've had that day one badge. I am a day one fan of Resident Evil, and I cannot understand why moving forward, this is the direction they choose. And honestly, what happened? At what point did these dull characters become a replacement for Jill Valentine, Rebecca Chambers, Barry Burton, Albert Wesker? Come on. I mean, bro. Ethan Winters is easily the most boring lead character in the entire series, and I am dead serious about that. He's your typical male lead rushing into the unknown to save his ungrateful girlfriend from psychopaths who have nothing to do with anything in the story of Resident Evil. Now tell me how that's Resident Evil. It's not. That's a simple fact. A fact you can't fight. You can't fight fact with opinions. So, please, I'm inviting you to. And I mean, I know Chris Redfield is supposed to be a major part of this game. I can't really tell from what they've shown, but it seems he's now unrecognizable yet again. But this takes place a few years after Biohazard? What? I mean, how can you go from looking like that to looking like this? His image never ceases to evolve with almost every installment of Resident Evil, but this version of Chris gives off a corporate side character vibe. Without any of his counterparts, this legendary original of the series feels hollow. Now tell me how that is Resident Evil. So, Resident Evil has pretty much always had compelling villains in some shape or form. Within each of the games, there's always been some kind of ugly, nasty creature from the depths crawling out to grab you. And I mean, although Jack Baker wasn't all that fantastic as a villain, I do think he was compelling in a fashion that disturbed as well as interested me. I wanted to learn more about him, but I mean, at the end of the day, he was kind of a dull, typical, average, regular. You know, nothing to really, talk about too much. Like, when it comes to Mr. X or Nemesis, those are incredibly powerful villains. And, when it comes to Resident Evil Village, why couldn't we get, like, another Ramon Salazar, or Albert Wesker, William Birkin, something like that along those lines. But instead, we're given witches, vampires, and werewolves. Oh my, got a big titty vampire lady coming at you. Yeah, this is no longer a Biohazard situation. It's much more like a fairy tale from a burnt-out Tim Burton. I mean, a big titty aristocrat vampire is the best they could do after the Texas Chainsaw Massacre clone. Tell me how that's Resident Evil, please. Please, I know there's some real Resident Evil fans out there. Not everyone's a fake Resident Evil fan these days. Come on. Please tell me how this is acceptable when it comes to, this huge, colossal, crazy story. I mean, we're on iteration 8 now. Resident Evil 8, pretty much. What is going on? How can this series evolve? How can we really get down to the nitty-gritty again and go back to the drawing board and make a completely fresh experience? I mean, at this point, it's been so beaten to death and bitch-slapped and fucking... Oh my god. Like, dude. I think Resident Evil is in great need of some revision. Perhaps somebody can come in and, I think at this point it's either reboot it completely and forget everything that we know and just, try and change the story and, the way comic books do. There's such a loose narrative that we can just bend it in any shape we want. Why not just restart from scratch with all these amazing characters and just, try something different? Because honestly, the road we're going down at this point, I don't know where it's going to lead us besides into a toilet bowl. I seriously, I don't have a huge problem with Resident Evil 7, but it's not Resident Evil. Just put a new title on it, because this shit is seriously muddying up the rest of the beautiful, amazing, legendary, grand, enticing titles. Resident Evil needs to end. Sorry, but I think Resident Evil needs to end. They had a good run. There are many good games. But this is no longer acceptable. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in. Dylan and the Details coming at you heavy with a reality check for the lazy millennial developers over at Clueless, Capcom. They continue to lose on a daily basis, and we're not going to let them get away with it. Oh no. Us real Resident Evil fans will continue to reality check them on a daily basis. And tomorrow we'll be going live. Michael Does Life and I, Dylan in the Details, coming at you heavy with that reality fucking check, because they deserve to know the reality of the situation. Thanks for tuning in.